This video is part of the CLOCK project. Loss of marine biodiversity and reduction in species abundance are only two of the many impacts of climate change on the oceans. These impacts affect fishing activity, leading to, for example, relocation of fishing fleets and changes in market costs and prices. Such changes may place fishing communities at risk, exacerbating marginalization of collectives, eroding social capital, and forcing migration to other communities. In the face of this climate emergency, we must adapt to the continuous impacts being felt now. The latest scientific evidence indicates that adaptation strategies will not be sufficient to ensure the planetary socio-environmental well-being, and that transformation strategies will be required. In Future Oceans Lab, we have developed an adaptation framework that considers fishery systems to consist of the following: an environmental component comprising species and ecosystems, whose changing distribution is causing fragmentation of habitats and generating new relationships between species. A social component comprising people from different characteristics and needs, collectives with different goals and ways of interacting, and governance that establishes the decision-making structures, mechanisms, and practices throughout the whole system. The multiple interactions between these components, involving extraction of natural resources, exchange of information between groups, monitoring and evaluation activities, and deliberative processes. Within this framework, we have examined how the fishery sector is responding to the impacts as stages of adaptation. At the individual level, the following stages have been identified: maintaining the status quo, remaining; making spontaneous changes, coping; carrying out systematic changes, such as changing the target species, but remaining in the sector as the only means of income, adaptation; diversifying livelihoods, early transformation; and leaving the small-scale extractive activity, full transformation. For each stage, we identified actions that may help or hinder the adaptation process. We observed that some political solutions, such as incentivizing co-management, participating in decision-making, and equitable access to fishing rights, may resolve problems related to the redistribution of species. Small-scale system. Within the fisheries sector, small-scale fishing communities are the first to be affected by climate change. These communities play important social, economic, and environmental roles via the collective management of ecosystems and associated services. After comparing scientific findings on sustainability, vulnerability, and adaptation in artisanal fishing communities throughout the world, we have found that the integration of an environmental perspective, the social and cultural factors, and the relationships between people and with the target species appear to be important factors in the adaptation process. Adaptation. The findings led us to consider how human adaptive capacities contribute to climate change adaptation. In 2018 to 2019, we conducted questionnaires to the artisanal fishing and shell fishing communities in Galicia, asking about socio-economic and environmental factors and adaptation strategies under different climate change scenarios. We obtained two main findings. 1. People dedicated to small-scale artisanal fishing responded to the impacts by following the stages defined in the adaptation framework, thereby confirming the underlying theory. 2. Adaptive capacities such as flexibility and learning, competing concerns and organization are key factors in the adaptation process. For example, participating in training activities, environmental and market management, diversifying marine resource and livelihoods, being female, having a social ecological system knowledge, and strong links to the sector are factors that favor adaptation and transformation. On the other hand, being older, having experience and perceiving inequalities in the sector are factors that hinder adaptation and transformation. The importance of these factors in the adaptation process varies with the magnitude of the impact. For example, for low impacts, age constrains adaptation and transformation. By contrast, for stronger impacts, training activities favor adaptation and transformation. The way that fisheries and shellfishers are organized must also be considered, because communication between equals, bonding ties, enables adaptation, while communication between different groups, bridging ties, favors transformation. We have demonstrated for the first time that communication with informal leaders enables the status quo of the system. We have also discovered that trust has the inverse effect to that of communication. In other words, trust between equals, bonding ties, favors resistance to change, and trust between different groups, bridging ties, hinders transformation. In addition, trust between people in different levels of the hierarchy structure, linking ties, enables transformation. These mechanisms are key to understand how to organize in response to the climate emergency. Conclusion: adaptation to climate change is a transversal process and is fundamental for developing sustainable systems and achieving social environmental justice. It is thus essential to understand how human capacities and the relationships between people and marine resources influence the adaptation process. The adaptation process framework is a tool of great potential value. For 1, transdisciplinary knowledge integration. 2, use as a manual for implementing measures. And 3, as a basis for generating new hypotheses and theories. This will help to better define adaptation strategies and design alternative systems, thus preventing possible maladaptation.